What's up, everyone? Marc Lobliner, CEO, MTS Nutrition. Bret Contreras has been the center of a lot of controversy. He did a video. I saw it on Instagram. I was tagged in it because I've gone on record as saying that hip thrusts are kind of silly. I'll get to that in a second. And also on YouTube, I believe. I didn't see the YouTube one, but I did. Steve Shaw sent me some of the comments, and I would like to get into my opinion on this. Now, is the hip thrust good or bad? Now, essentially what Bret Contreras said in his video is the hip thrust should be a major lift. What people fail to actually see or read in his write-up or anything, if your goal is to have better glutes, you should be doing more hip thrusts. Now, I don't know his stance on performance athletes with the hip thrust, but I got to thinking about my use of the glute bridge. Now, the glute bridge is essentially you don't have an elevated platform, but you essentially have your feet on the ground, your knees bent, and your weight is on your shoulder blades, and I put a mini band right above the knees for resistance, and I have an athlete go up and squeeze their glutes. When you teach an athlete, this is why we do mini band training, et cetera, when you teach an athlete to recruit their glutes, the glute prevents valgus of the knee. That's the knee caving in. Knee caving in is a big issue, and that's what causes a lot of ACL tears. For example, on our OO girls team at the soccer club I coach at, we had 4 ACLs this year. This year, I took over this program with help of my good friend, Coach Caesar, and we are hoping to not only decrease that by at least half. I don't want any ACL injuries, ACL tears. So I utilize anything I can to recruit the glutes. Now, I wrote an in-depth article on Tiger Fitness. I want you to click on the link in the description box below because I go over this, okay? A lot of this is opinion, but I would like to surmise what I went over in the article. I would love you to go to the article and read this and also just visit the site. You know, it really helps us. We got bills to pay and all that good stuff. Anyway, so as you guys know, has been made fun of. I'm an Exos trainer. I've been to as many Exos courses as a man can go to. I'm in love with their methodology, and essentially we are functional trainers. We do things functionally. If there's ever been a functional hippie, it's me. In fact, my Big 5 weight training program is based around functional lifts or primal movements. Primal movement means that it's something you do in nature. For example, if you don't have a toilet and you have to take a poop, you have to know how to squat. Hence, squatting is a primal movement. I can also argue, on the other hand, that I usually don't take a shit with 315 on my back. Just saying. So one of the arguments, and I got this from various articles on the internet on why the hip thrust is bad from my colleagues, my functional strength colleagues. And I'm going to have to dissent a little bit. Now, one is the hip thrust causes insufficiency of the hamstrings and calves. What I wrote is by stimulating the glutes and having the hamstrings and calves in a disadvantageous position to fire, your hamstrings and calves will try to fire but be inefficient. Since your leg is bent, your hamstrings and calves are in a very crimped position, causing them to cramp. It would also, so a movement like a squat wouldn't have this issue. So here's my problem. Who cares? Who cares if it's inefficient at loading the hamstrings and the calves? Assuming that you do squats, assuming that you do pistol squats or Bulgarian split squats or deadlifts or whatever, I don't give a crap if one of your 5 movements has a shortening or a disadvantageous position of the muscle. If the hip thrust is the only exercise in your regimen, and even Bret Contreras does not recommend this, he has other accessory movements. I looked up what he does. I looked at his Instagram. I stalked him a little bit. There's no way this is going to be an issue. One other strength is that the weight fails to match the strength curve. The hip thrust lowers the glutes as they bunch up or contract. This is a short moment arm in the motion, and the force is the same throughout the motion. Now, a moment arm is the perpendicular distance from a line of action to the fulcrum, basically where your body rotates, okay? So basically it loads you really heavy in a really small movement, and you aren't using a lot of your body like the squat. So here's the deal. Who cares? Who really cares? So at the end of the day, it's an issue if you never perform within the strength curve being on squat. You're obviously going to be able to move more on a hip thrust because you're only going through a short range of motion, which is loading the strongest muscle in your body only, which is the glutes. So obviously your quads and your hamstrings and everything else and your calves even don't have to support support that entire strength curve, right? Because you can only load your glutes as much as you can load your hamstrings, as much as you can load your quadricep in a full range of motion squat. Who cares? Do squats. I don't care if you do squats second or first. As long as you're doing some squat motion, you will work within that arm. And so you're loading your glutes more. If your focus is getting a better ass, as I think Bret is trying to do here, who cares? So here's another thing. The hip thrust is a crappy setup, meaning that you have a bar resting across this bone on your hip, and if you are like me and you tuck your penis into your waistband, I don't. It's not that big. But I wrap it around my waist. No, I'm still lying. Check it out. Who cares? Put a pad on it, put a towel under it, and if it's too much, just lighten the weight. If it hurts your hip bones, lighten the weight to where it doesn't hurt, and just squeeze. Look, when I do glute bridges in training with my athletes, I tell them, and I yell this, I say, this lift is as hard as you want to make it. If you can do 315 on a hip thrust, but you put 135 on, but you squeeze your butt like it's 315, like you're in prison and you just dropped the soap, by all means, you're going to get a hell of a glute contraction. So that is a stupid argument. Also, the Nautilus hip thrust machine kind of negates that anyway. The hip thrust encourages hyperextension of the hip and spine. Hip thrust causes the hips to hyperextend, causing stress on the joints in unnatural positions. Hip thrust can cause a posterior pelvic tilt, leading to potential back issues. You should maintain a neutral back at all times, and not a natural movement by nature. It forces you into dangerous positions. So here's the deal. When done correctly, and it's not the only thing an athlete does, it's complementary to other movements. Also realize having a slight posterior pelvic tilt is not the end of the world. Now, I went off on a girl yesterday at training, not went off, but I corrected her because she was talking to her friends. I don't care if you talk during training as long as you keep moving, right? She's in the middle of a deadlift, all right? So she gets up, she has the trap bar, right? She's here, she comes up, and she does this. She turns her head at the load position of a deadlift. Oh! Time out, Missy. Look straight ahead of you, 10 feet in front of your neutral spine. Neutral spine is much more important than a neutral posterior. Serious. It is. You're not going to snap your neck in half by your ass tilting a little bit back. Not a problem. So while it's not the greatest thing in the world, come on, guys. Now you're just being pompous asses. You know, it's like, come on, dude. So here's the deal. It's not a big issue. And the functional argument only makes sense if that's the only thing the athlete is doing. So it's an isolation movement that has no functional purpose. That's another one. What the experts say, the hip thrust is inefficient, harmful to the joints, allows less tension for growth, and supports muscle imbalances. So here's the deal. I disagree really, really hard. When you, like I said before, man, when I'm doing glute bridges, I want that athlete to mentally be able to contract their glute. That way, if they're in a real game situation, and they get hit off the ball, they go in for a hard tackle, whatever it is, that their body naturally contracts their glute, preventing the knee valgus, keeping their body in a good position to prevent injury. So it's actually the opposite, in my opinion. Tension for growth is another one. They're like, oh, squats are better for growth. Yeah, they are. Functional people tend to be really small. As a former professional bodybuilder, I can tell you, I built a lot of muscle doing really shitty movements. Leg press, all right? Leg extension, which I would never do a leg extension anymore. Guess what? I don't give a shit if they're bad for you. They load the muscle. To argue that it's inefficient at friggin' muscle growth is just ridiculous. You're literally placing force and load on a muscle, okay? Force and load. How does a muscle grow? What is the main avenue for muscle growth? Progressive overload. Period. The end. Bam. Done. So, my final word on this. If you're going for bigger, better, firmer, nicer, more edible glutes, by all means, do a glute bridge. Do a hip thrust. Do it. I think even Bret's going to agree. Squats and deadlifts are still awesome. You should still do them. However, to say that a hip thrust is not a welcomed addition, and I'm the first one to say, I have videos out that say hip thrusts are stupid. At the end of the day, I was wrong, and I'm willing to admit that. As I look into it and I read more and I look at Bret's stuff, I respect the man. Because when he read my stuff, he was respectful to me. We had a great dialogue. I believe hip thrusts are a welcome addition to any program. And I believe that if you are an athlete, you should add in glute bridges, which I might do an example of or whatever one of these days. At least for my club, I will. However, guys, functional training community, strength trainers, speed coaches, the reason our profession has been set back and set in the Stone Ages for so long, because a lot of us thought that weight training made you bulky, made you slow, made you muscle bound. Come to find out, a trap bar deadlift, lifting heavy weight and loading posterior chain is the only scientifically proven method we have with weight to increase speed. We've been wrong for decades. We've been having people do stupid shit like hula hoops and ladder drills. I love ladder drills if done correctly, by the way. Hula hoops are great, especially at parties when you're drunk. But dude, strength, speed community, get your head out of your ass. Squats are great. I'll squat every week till the day I die. If I'm in a wheelchair, I'll find a goddamn way to squat. All right? But guys, to say that because something doesn't utilize your full fucking strength curve, that it's not necessary, that it's dangerous, you're just reaching. I can make an argument for anything. I can make an argument that the best way to cause my manhood to grow bigger is to tie a string around it and tie the other end of the string and jump off. Makes sense, right? At the end of the day, we're all grasping for straws, dude. Give this dude props. Bret has something. And if we don't listen to him and people like him who are going out on a limb and going against the grain and saying uncomfortable shit, we will never produce better athletes. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Comment down below. Be sure to read the article because it took me a lot of time to write it. It took me like 32 minutes. And it took Steve at least 5 minutes to edit it. So at least give us that. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm Marc Lobliner, and that's not a game.